Sir, you're not audible if you're speaking something.
Excuse me, sir.
Hello, sir. You are not audible. Sir.
Can someone call him?
Hello, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Now you're audible.
Okay, I didn't realize that I was. Okay, let me just try once again. Okay, hello. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know, guys, because I was under the impression that I was okay. So basically, you didn't hear anything at all till now.
No, sir.
No,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Oh, okay. That's so sad. Okay, fine. Anyway, so let me start from the beginning. So I was just giving you an overview of what we had done so far, which is basically that we started off with the 5 transistor OTA, which had limited gain. And then in order to increase the gain, we went for a telescopic cascode. Now, in a telescopic cascode, we couldn't, we had quite a high gain, but the problem was that its input common mode range was limited and also the output swing was limited, right? So we went for a folded cascode op amp where you get a very good input common mode range. And in fact, if you put both the complementary stages together, you get a rail to rail input common mode range op amp. And that is really good. And you have a pretty good gain and also a decent output swing. Now, I think a few lectures back, someone had raised the question as to why can't we cascade 2 stages and see if that can actually help us. Okay. Now, that is what we will do here. And in this case, what I was trying to explain here is that when you're going to use an op amp in the context of providing some kind of an amplification, now what happens is that your input swing range is quite limited, right? But then your output swing becomes quite high, right? Your output swing is higher because of the amplification that is provided. Uh, Okay, now I am audible, right? Now only I got the message. I think Prashant had sent that I was not audible. Now you,
Yes,
I'm
sir,
audible.
you're audible now.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
sir.
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So in this kind of an application, let's say high output voltage swing is of much more interest or requirement than even the input common mode range. So these are all things that vary from application to application, right? So in the industry, let's say you work for a company which designs these things. Now there are very different scenarios in which op amps get used. Now these are op amps that get in. I mean, you integrate these op amps on the chip. So it is not that you just design a standalone op amp. That also people do. But in many cases, when you, let's say you're working in a group which works on, let us say, ADC design or digital to analog converter design, like there you use op amps. So there you have certain set of specifications. You might work in team where, let us say, you are looking at designing RFICs, where you're looking at the baseband filtering and designing filters and things like that. So there also you use op amps, and then you have certain requirements. So there are different requirements. Okay, there are times where you need a rail-to-rail input common mode range. In that case, you pick that particular topology. There are other places where you want a really good output swing, and you really don't care so much about the input common mode range, in which case you pick something like a two-stage OTA. Now, what is a two-stage OTA? So basically it has obviously two stages, and the way it is typically designed is that the stage 1 is a high gain stage. Okay. And stage 2 is a high swing stage. All right. Now that is the kind of partitioning that you typically do. Now, what is your first stage? Your first stage can be a telescopic cascode. It can be a normal 5-transistor OTA. I mean, these are all different. I mean, it can even be a folded cascode, right? All these things can form your first stage of your op amp. Okay. So let me kind of give you a very simple two-stage OTA, where the first stage is nothing but a 5-transistor OTA. Let's call it ITAIL 1. Now this is one output. Let's say it is going to another second stage. The second stage here, so only for your first stage you need the tail current source, because that is where CMRR and other things come into the picture. Now once the common mode rejection happens, the second stage need not be the second stage need not be actually having something like a differential pair. It can just normally be a common source amplifier. Now, this is a fully differential two-stage OTA. Now, typically what is done is that you take all these things and it is biased through a single current mirror. All right. So now can you tell me which will be V out P and which will be V out M? Okay. Let us say this is your V in plus, this is your V in minus. Now tell me which of is the right side V out plus or is the left side V out plus?
Left side V out plus.
Left side is V out plus. Why? Because from here to here you have a 180 degree, and from here to here you have another 180 degree. So this becomes V out plus. The right hand side becomes V out minus, because both are kind of common source stages. Both of them give you a 180 degree phase shift. All right. So this is basically your two stage. This is your first stage. Now your first stage can also become it can be telescopic, it can be 5T, it can also be a folded cascode, right? All those options are possible. And typically, in order to keep a large output swing, right? You use a common source at the output. Now, why is this a common source? Because basically you're having, this is a PMOS based common source, right? This is your input, this is your current source load, and you're taking your output, all right? Now you can also design a two-stage, this is a fully differential two-stage OTA. Let me write it as fully differential two-stage OTA. Now we can also do a single-ended two-stage OTA. Now just for the sake of showing it, let me maybe use a telescopic cascode as the first stage. Right? Let's say this is V in plus, this is V in minus. Let's say this is VB1. This will also be VB2. And basically we are forming a current mirror load. So obviously this becomes your Vout1. Let's call it Vout1. Now this is going to go to a PMOS input pair. PMOS input stage. And this becomes your final. All right. So this becomes a single-ended two-stage OTA. In this case, I have used a telescopic cascode as the first stage. All right. Now, can you tell me why are we using a PMOS input pair? PMOS input transistor for the second stage common source. Why not an NMOS? This particular transistor, why are we using a PMOS input, PMOS current, common source? Why can't we use an NMOS common source? Anyone? Come on, guys, you can attempt an answer. What happens if I take my Vout1 to an NMOS and then use a, let's say I have biasing it using something like this.
Sir, there is a possible mismatch in impedance.
Which impedance?
Like the Vout1 impedance going inside the transistor. Like.
Okay, what is the impedance looking in here at low frequencies?
So it's infinite, right?
Correct. What is the input impedance looking in here at low frequencies?
Oh, okay, sir. It would be infinite also.
Same, right? At higher frequencies, of course, you'll have the CGS coming into the picture. Okay, let me give you a hint. Think of DC levels.
It might it might be possible that the NMOS goes out of saturation if we connect it with the NMOS directly.
Okay, you're kind of very close to the answer. Yes. So why will it go out of saturation? Or what can you say about a typical DC level of this line, Vout1?
Sir, usually telescopic kind of cascodes have higher DC output levels.
Okay. Let's say even this one. So you're right. I mean, the DC voltage here is typically greater than VDD by 2, right? The reason being that, okay, if you take this 5 transistor OTA, all you need is basically the VSD on top here. Here you have both the VDS of this transistor and the VDS of this transistor, right? So, I mean, on an average, typically, this voltage will be, roughly speaking, can be close to 2/3 of VDD. Not necessarily, but I mean, a typical, if you kind of say, okay, there are 3 VDSs stacked and you're tapping it across, after one VDS, this is what you would kind of get. Same thing here, right? You have 2/5, or rather 3/5 here, right? So definitely this voltage will be higher than VDD/2. So if you're using a 1.8 volt supply, 0.9 is your this thing. It's very likely that this will be around 1.1, 1.2, something like that, right? So which means that if you connect it to an NMOS, as Ashish was pointing out, the VDS required for this NMOS to be in saturation is quite large, right? You have a higher VDSAT over here. But on the other hand, when you have, let us say 1.1, 1.2, you have a more reasonable VSG for your PMOS. It more naturally flows that, you kind of connect a PMOS input transistor so that the VSG is in reasonable values. And accordingly, the VSD SAT is also reasonable so that you don't run into unnecessary DC issues. Because here on chip, you cannot put DC block capacitors. You can put DC block capacitors only for RF circuits, where you put some 1 picofarad or 5 picofarad, something like that, and then get away with it because there you have to put and you're willing to pay that area. I mean, if you put a 5 picofarad capacitance here, it will at low frequencies, because we are not talking about gigahertz range here, we are talking about kilohertz at max megahertz, right? So, or sometimes if you're looking at sensor interfaces and so on, you're talking about hertz, 100 hertz or even less than 100 hertz, that kind of numbers. So your DC block capacitor has to become extremely large, which is impractical to put on chip. You cannot put a 1 microfarad capacitor on chip. It is not possible at all, right? So, which is why you need to, this is the main issue with, cascading stuff in analog on chip, right? Your off chip discrete components, what you can do, you can nicely put some 10 microfarad capacitance and then, bias it again with whatever bias you want. All that is possible in discrete electronics when you are designing a board, or if you are designing a circuit on breadboard or on a PCB. But on chip, it is not possible. So you have to be able to work with the existing DC level that is there. Okay, so when you're designing this, what I will do is I will take one design session where I will teach you how to design these circuits. So far I've just analyzed it. I wanted to kind of run through all so that you can have a head start on your project. Probably next class, which will be on Wednesday, right? Wednesday first hour class will get cancelled because of this. Wednesday afternoon, can we have a class?
There will be class till 4 p.m. on Wednesday.
On Wednesday, okay. Then what about Monday or Tuesday? You guys have lab or something?
Yes, I will lab on that Monday and Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, we need to identify proper slots. Okay. Anyway, so I will conduct a design session where I will show you. I will design it on LTSpice. I'll show you how to design. So in this case, you know that your output DC voltage is roughly around, let's say 1.2 or 1.1, something like that, and then you'll be able to design with that. Okay. All right. So now let us look at what is the gain. So in this particular thing, what is your voltage gain? Can you tell me? Okay, let's put some names. Okay, what is the gain here? The first stage gain is GM1. Let us say R01 parallel to R03. This is the first stage gain multiplied by the second stage gain, which is GM7 R07 parallel to R08. Okay, so this becomes your overall gain. Similarly, you can write for this also, right? We know the gain of a telescopic cascode. We know the gain of a common source. So we know how to put these things together. All right. Now, what about the input common mode range? I will not go into it. We have already seen what is the input common mode range for a 5 transistor OTA. What is the input common mode range of a telescopic cascode? Now, what is your output swing limits? So ICMR already derived. Okay, what is your output swing limits? This also we have seen in the case of common source, right? So basically you need VDSAT of 7 and 8 or VDSAT. So V out max is what? Let's say VSD sat of VDD minus VSD sat of 7. And what is V out min? It is the VD sat of 8, right? I mean, or equivalently 5 and 6, right? So basically you have a very high swing that you get, all right? And similarly, you can write for, whatever topology you have got, because, it's pretty much what we have already seen. Okay, now let us look at noise.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, won't like the V out of the first stage also affect the V out like in the second stage? Because
Okay,
the
so let us,
VGS
okay, let's throw in some numbers. Let us say in terms of normal voltage gain. So typically how you design the stage is that, let us say you want 60 dB gain from this 2-stage OTA. Okay, for example, if this is the case, and let's say you want let us say for design you need 60 dB. All right. Now, typically, how do you design 2-stage OTAs? You will do what is called as gain partitioning. All right. So in the normal natural numbers, you multiply the gain. In logarithmic numbers, you add the gains, right? So typically what you'll do is, okay, first stage gain is taken to be, let's say 40 dB. And let's say second stage gain is taken to be 20 dB. All right. So kind of we saw here, no, the first stage is the high gain stage and second stage is the high swing stage. So for example, if you take a telescopic cascode followed by a common source, now you can easily reach 40 dB in your first stage. Okay. And the second stage is going to give you 20 dB. Now, if I'm going to kind of put in these numbers, let us say what is 10 dB, 20 dB, this is 10 volt per volt, this is 100 volt per volt gain, right? So if I want, let's say a 1 volt output swing at the output, what will be the swing here at V out 1?
0.1.
0.1 or 100 millivolt, right? So definitely, even for a small value like 20 dB gain, right? Of your second stage, the input output swing of your first stage is still quite limited. Understood? So what limits output swing is mostly the second stage rather than the first stage. Does it answer your question?
Okay, sir.
All right. So 100 millivolt is fine. Okay. So even 1.8 volt, let us say you want to have let's say 200 here. Let's say you want 1.4 volt swing. Here you'll have how much? 140 millivolt swing, which is like very, very reasonable. It is easy to achieve, right? It's not a big deal. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, like
Because,
sir, like I was asking here, like the VGS or VSG of the PMOS, it will it cannot be like near to VDD. Like it will be somewhat below VDD. So won't it affect the VSD there? Like we cannot write it directly VDD minus VSD sat.
here, the output here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what is VSD sat? Like if you use the square law equation, basically it becomes VSG minus mod VTHP, right? So
Yes,
here
sir.
directly you get that. So if it is, let's say, so that is why, I mean, VSD sat definitely depends on the VSG, right?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Got it.
Sir, I have one more question. Sir, like, why are we biasing this second stage with ITIL current?
why are we having a, no, it is not I-tail current. See, it is a current mirror. So for example, again, so that's another good question. Let me answer that. Let us say I have a 10 microamp current source which is coming. All right, this is my reference current. Okay. Now my telescopic cascode might require 50 microamp. All right. My output stage might require 30 microamp. So basically, if I have a W by L naught here, so this will be 5 times W by L naught here, and this will be 3 times W by L naught here. You understood? So instead of having multiple current mirrors, basically this is a current source, right?
Okay, sir.
Okay, so this is nothing but what is this? Actual schematic is this, right? This is your common source with a current source load, right? So how is this current source implemented? Using an NMOS transistor here. So this is also a current source. This is also a current source.
Okay, sir.
Got it? Yeah. So in fact, what people will do is all these three transistors, right? This maybe let's say this is M0, this is M1, let's say M2, let's say this is M3, M4, and so on. So M0, M1, and M2, all three transistors will be laid out together in a common centroid way. Okay. So because all these three are current mirrors, so the layout will be done for all these three transistors together as one particular block, where you have all the you do common centroid. So probably this will come in the middle. We looked at the common centroid techniques, right? So it should be that the centroid of all the three transistors is the same. That is how they do. Okay. And if you look at, for example, this is a good point to talk about layout. So basically, this whole thing in this particular case, right? So this will be laid out together. All these 4 transistors in this particular schematic will be laid out together as a common centroid layout because it's a current mirror. All right. Then what will happen? These 2 things will also be laid out as a common centroid. Okay. And obviously these both will also be common centroid. Okay. And of course, the other second transistor is still fine but mainly, if for example, this transistor 3 and 4, they are a diode connected pair, then obviously they will also become common centroid. Transistor 1 and 2, definitely common centroid because you don't want, you want both of them to be identical. So you don't want all those gradient effects to come and affect your thing. Because what happens if there is a mismatch between M1 and M2? We looked at it before, right? What happens if there is mismatch between M1 and M2?
Differential mode input will lead to a common mode output.
Correct. There will be a conversion from common mode input to differential mode output. So CM to DM conversion happens. Not only that, it will give rise to offsets, right? So offset of the op-amp comes because of, due to gradient errors and things like that, you will have offset coming into the op-amp. So you try to minimize them as much as possible by putting these things in as a common centroid layout. The same thing, similar thing here. Definitely these 2 will have to become common centroid. All the 3 current sources will be common centroid. Okay. All right. Now let's look at noise. So noise, how can you, let us probably take this particular schematic, right? What is the noise? We already know the noise of the first stage, right? Transistors 1 to 4. We already have derived it. So for Vn due to M1 to M4, Vn in, right, is 8 kT gamma 1 by Gm plus Gm3 by Gm1 squared. This we have already derived earlier, correct? This is for the first stage. Now, what about the noise of the second stage? What is the input preferred noise due to the second stage? Can you tell me? So because there is symmetry, you can say M5 to M8 right? First of all, 2 into 4 kT gamma, you have GM5 plus GM6 multiplied by the output impedance, which is R05 parallel to R06 the whole squared, right? Divided by the overall gain. So you have GM1 squared, R01 parallel to R03 squared, GM5 squared, R05 parallel to R06 the whole squared. Okay. This becomes the contribution due to transistors M5 to M8. Okay. The sum of these two is basically your Vn in squared is basically Vn in M1 to M4 squared bar plus Vn in M5 to M8 squared bar. All right. So you take find the total output noise current multiplied by 2 because of the symmetry and uncorrelated nature of noise, and then multiply by R out squared, divide by the overall gain, you get the input referred noise of your two-stage OTA. So in other words, you can say that transistors M1 to M4 have a larger contribution, whereas transistors M5 to M8 have a lesser contribution because of the gain of the preceding stage, right? Okay. Now, what I want to do right now is to kind of move to, let's talk about bandwidth. Okay. All right. Now, can you look at, we'll just for the sake of simplicity, take this particular schematic, a fully differential 5 transistor OTA, and maybe I'll just, or even let me take a 5 transistor OTA, draw it again. Can you tell me how many poles are going to be there? Let's look at the fully differential case, and of course, we know how to analyze for the single-ended case. All right. V in plus, V in minus, this is V out minus. Right. Say M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, M6, M7, and M8. All right. Now, obviously, there is a load capacitor at the output. Okay. So there is a pole at the output, right? What is the pole at the output? Can you tell me? 1 over
2 pi CL R0 5
R0 5 R0 6 multiplied by CL.
CL.
Okay. Okay. Where else will you have poles here?
First stage output.
First stage output, correct. So here you have parasitic capacitance here. Now let's call this node as XX, I mean XX bar or something, right? Now what are the capacitances here? Let's call it CX. CX comprises of the CSG or the CGS of 5, correct? Plus the CDB of 4, the CDB of 2, right? So let us ignore the CGDs because, you know, although you have CGD, it is a much smaller number. So these are the contributions that you have here, right? Now, what is the, let's call it omega px. Can you tell me what is the pole location for this one?
One by CX.
CX multiplied by, what is the output impedance? What is the impedance seen by CX?
R0 4 parallel to R0 2.
Correct, right? Because this node is a high impedance node. What do you mean by high impedance node? Basically, the impedance of that node is high. You look up, you see the drain of a transistor. You look down, you see the drain of another transistor, right? And you look to the right hand side, you see the gate of a transistor. So the real part, the resistance seen by this capacitor is nothing but R0 4 parallel to R0 2. Of course, this is equal to R0 1 parallel to R0 3 as well. Okay. Now compare these two poles and tell me, will one of them be can you say that this becomes a single pole system? Can you approximate it to be a single pole system? Or will it remain to be a two pole system? So if you recall the previous topologies that we have seen, we saw that there was a dominant pole which had the output impedance 1 over output impedance multiplied by CL, correct? And for example, if you look at the telescopic cascode by itself, you have an output pole. You also had pole here, right? You had poles here, all these places. But then all of them, what did we have? We had GM by the capacitance, correct? And we said that the GM by some C, anyway, GM by CL is your unity gain frequency, right? If you, for a telescopic cascode, right, the dominant, dominant pole was 1 by R out times CL. The non-dominant poles, we saw a lot of this thing, we had GMX divided by CX, right? Where GMX was like the the GM of the transistor above it, the source at which it was connected, and the capacitance at that particular node. So this was approximately all those poles that we saw. We saw multiple poles for a single-ended case and just one more non-dominant pole for a fully differential case, right? But whatever it is, these all were like, if you look at the omega UGF, right, this is approximately GM divided by CL. So although typically CL is greater than all the CX, and therefore it implied that omega UGF was lesser than all the omega non-dominant X. That is all the non-dominant poles. This happens typically. Okay, and therefore this can be approximated as a single pole op amp. Correct. This is what we discussed in the case of telescopic, both single-ended differential, folded cascode single-ended differential, 5-transistor OTA single-ended. You had the mirror pole and so on. All of the things we said that it's still looking like a single pole system, right? But in this case, can we make that assumption? Yes or no?
No, sir.
No. Why? Although CX can be, typically less than CL, still R04, R02, omega P out and omega PX are kind of in the same order, right? Of course, if CL is greater than CX, then maybe this will be greater than this, but it's not much greater than this. And both of them are smaller than omega UGF, correct? So what will happen is that this basically two-stage OTA, let's say it is log of f on the x-axis, and let's say 20 log of AV of S, right? So you have A naught, the low frequency gain, and you have the first pole, and you have the second pole. This becomes your omega P2. This becomes your omega P1. Right. The reason being that the intermediary node is actually a high impedance node. Now, what can potentially go wrong if you do this? Okay, so that's what I want to get started off today, and then we will continue it in the following classes. All right. So for this, I want to kind of go into a little bit of feedback theory. Now, this normal negative feedback theory, I'm sure all of you have studied in your undergrad, right? So this is just a refresher, right? So let us say you have H of S as the system, and you have a negative feedback system. Let's say you have X as your input, and you have a factor beta as your feedback factor. Let's say this is Y. This is negative feedback system, right? Now, what is Y by X of S? It becomes H of S divided by 1 plus beta times H of S. Right? This all of us have studied. Now, what is the loop gain? Loop gain is basically you go around the loop and see what is the gain. Right? It is beta times H of S. Right? Now, if this system has to be stable, right? Or rather, let us say, if this system has to start oscillating, what should be the condition?
Beta HS should be -1.
Okay, beta h of s is -1, or rather the Barkhausen's condition. Barkhausen's condition for oscillations is basically beta times h of s magnitude is equal to 1, and the angle of beta times h of s, the loop gain, is in this case is what? Minus
180 degree.
180 degree, because there is already a 180 degree happening here because you're subtracting the two signals. So there is a 180 degree shift that happens here. Now, if your h of s also provides another 180 degree, now Barkhausen's conditions are satisfied. Then this negative feedback system will start oscillating. Correct. So in other words, what is required is this h of s should, the h of s should not give you 180 degree phase shift, because now because it's a function of s, it also has, basically it has some bunch of poles, and that will correspond to not only the amplitude changes, magnitude changes, it will also cause phase changes. Okay. Now, this thing basically depends only on the loop gain. Doesn't matter where, where is your input output located and so on. If this condition is satisfied, it will start oscillating, right? Okay. So which is why you basically do what is called as the loop gain plot, right? You have log of f or log of omega. You have a mod of log of beta times j omega, 20 times this. This is your magnitude plot, and also you have beta times h of j omega angle plot, right? So let us say this again is log of omega. Now now in this case, I want to kind of compare this system to the op-amp system that we have looked at here. Now you have this op-amp, okay? Let's say you're putting some feedback here, all right? This is your input. There is subtraction happening here, right? This is a negative feedback system. We know that, right? This is your V out. And let us say this is your, instead of H of S, let's say H of S or A of S or something. Now this op amp right now has two poles, right? Let us study what happens when you have two poles. We are assuming here that beta is a constant. That is, the feedback network does not have any frequency dependent parameter. So what will happen here? So let us say you have your first pole, and then you have your second pole, say omega p2, omega p1. Now how will your phase response be? It will start at 0. Here it will go to -45, and it will degrade, and will try to reach -90. But before that, let's say the omega p2 kind of starts kicking in, right? And then it will kind of be something like this. All right. Now these are all very much dependent on the relative positions of, let's just say this is 180 degree, minus 180 degree, right? Now obviously, it would not have reached 180 degree most likely. Okay. Let me say, let's say it's something like this, right? Let's say you get some angle here. Now, what is your phase margin here? Which is your gain crossover frequency?
The UGF.
Yeah, this is your gain crossover frequency, or this is your unity gain frequency. Now, your phase crossover frequency will happen at a much later stage. Now, what is your phase margin here? let me say, I'll kind of draw it. It's a right. Your phase crossover or phase reaching 180 kind of happens a little later. So obviously this is not going to be unstable, right? But what is your phase margin here? This is your
One.
phase margin, right? So let us say this is theta. So minus, I mean 180 degree minus mod theta is basically your phase margin, right? What does phase margin convey to you? Phase margin basically conveys to you saying that when you put it at unity gain, I mean, when you have this feedback system, how many more degrees to go before you reach instability? Correct. Now, if your phase margin is, let us say, negative in this case, that is, if your phase crossover happens before your gain crossover, it's an unstable system. Basically, that it has already crossed 180 degrees, right? I'm sure all of you have studied that in control systems. But in this case, it is not unstable because the phase crossover frequency is greater than the gain crossover frequency. Therefore, it is still a stable system. But if your phase crossover frequency, because let us say this is your phase crossover frequency, right? If your phase crossover frequency happens to be lower than your gain crossover frequency, it means that although the phase has crossed 180 degree, the gain is still greater than 1, which means it will become an unstable system, which is basically that you will have growing oscillations, right? But whereas here in this case, you have a phase margin which is not negative, or it is still a stable system. But again, you can see that the phase margin here is quite limited, right? So, so because of that, what is going to happen here is we see here that the phase margin, even graphically, we can see that it is actually pretty poor, and this gives rise to certain undesired effects in our op-amp. Okay, so what is that and what are the ways to mitigate it? We will look at it in next class. Any doubts, any questions? All right. Okay, so with this, let me wind up the class today. So I will just maybe upload some previous year's question paper so that you can take a look at it. And the syllabus for the quiz can be till 2-stage OTS. Okay, probably not this 2-pole system and other things I have not completed yet, but up to probably, let us say, up to somewhere here, noise and up to the 2-stage OTS. This will be for the quiz on Monday. So all the best for your quiz. So it will be similar to last time.
That means previous lecture.
It will be till this particular lecture, till the 2-stage OTA.
Okay, so that means this also included.
This also is in progress. All right. So understand the concepts and see what is important is that we have looked at it mostly in the abstract way. I will give you some questions where you can see how you can, work out problems based on that. Okay, given a certain bias voltage or with certain biasing conditions, how do you actually apply them? So that is how, I mean, if you can do that. So for example, I gave you that common source question in the previous quiz, right? So basically, we have done the theory in class. What is needed is basically fitting in numbers, applying the theory to that particular problem. So that kind of stuff is what will be asked. So conceptual understanding is needed. Okay. So also, if you want, you can use a sheet of formula, right? Like let's say the current equations, the GM equations. If you want a small paper, you can write your formula and use it for your exam. Okay. Okay, that is allowed. So don't write all the equations that we have derived for the other things. Maybe just the current equation and the GM equations you can maybe write in a piece of paper and use it if needed. Or okay, let's not do that. What I will do is in the question paper itself, I will give you the required formulas, right? The GM formulas and current formulas, drain equation, drain current formulas, all that I'll give in the question paper. Don't bring any sheets of paper, because at least if it is a exam here, then I can at least see what you have written. But because monitoring is not possible here, I will just give the required formulas in the paper. Of course, the rest of the derivations and applying them to the circuits you need to do. Okay. Okay. So thanks everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, can you send some tutorial kind of thing?
Yeah, I'll upload it today. What I'll do is the previous year's questions, I will just put it up. I mean, if I think that should be a good start. I mean, that will kind of show you some, some pointer to how you need to do. And of course, in addition to it, some conceptual questions will be there.
Okay.
Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.